that you need to raise in order to implement that program. And that's true if you're talking about, say, producing a good, because producing a good costs actual money, but it's not true if you're just talking about, say, something like Social Security, where you're taking in a bunch of tax revenue from one group of people and then just giving a bunch of benefits to another group of people. So Social Security would be a sort of quintessential example of what we would call a transfer. I think more importantly, in sort of an environmental context, is if you think about taxes that are supposed to internalize externalities, which is what we'll be talking about in the next couple lectures. But if you think about taxes that are basically imposing a cost on activities that harm the environment, so something like, say, a gas tax, so burning gasoline, of course, is going to create local air pollution. It's going to contribute to global warming by increasing carbon emissions and so forth. So you can think about setting a price on that damage and then charging consumers the price. So you might set, say, a gas tax at like 50 cents a gallon or something like that to try to reflect the cost of that damage. It's tempting to think of like, okay, well, the cost of that, so the benefit of that policy is clearly that you'll reduce carbon emissions and you'll reduce local air pollution, and so there'll be health benefits and other environmental benefits and so forth, right? It's tempting to think that the cost of the program is that 50 cents per gallon that you're raising. So maybe, I think it's something like 140 billion gallons per year or something like that of gasoline that gets used in the United States. But whatever the amount is, if you take all that, multiply it by 50 cents, would turn out to be a large number, then you'd say, okay, well, the cost would be like, in that case, $70 billion. That's not the correct way to think about it, though, because it's not like we're taking that money and then just burning it up. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that money. At that point, there's various things the government could do with it. One is that it could use it to basically pay down the deficit, so that would prevent them from having to raise other taxes. Another is that they could use it to pay it out as like other benefits, so they could use it to like fund Social Security benefits or something to the extent there was a shortfall there. And then the third is they could use it to actually produce goods and services that people value, so they can spend it on like education or on like, Pell Grants or something like that. So in all of those cases, there is a cost to consumers at 50 cents per gallon, but the benefits, there are also sort of benefits on the other side of the ledger, right? So you're either able to do other tax cuts or you're able to reduce the deficit or something like that. And so it turns out that the cost of the cost of tax doesn't really depend on how much revenue it's producing, but rather it sort of depends on the fact that on the margin, there'll be a reduction in total miles traveled, because when it becomes more expensive to drive, you're less likely to drive, and you'll probably also buy like a more fuel efficient car because the price of gasoline will be higher. And so there'll be some utility loss because people aren't driving quite as much, or because they're not buying quite as heavy a car. And that would be the sort of correct cost of the program, not the total amount of revenue that's raised from the tax. Okay. So the bottom line is the transfers are not going to affect efficiency if they don't change the allocation. So if they're not actually moving like goods from one set of people to another, or they're not changing the total number of goods being produced, then transfers don't end up affecting efficiency. Does anybody know what the helicopters are, by the way? So they, oh, is that it? I assumed there was some protest or something, because usually, I mean, honestly, like at least over the last 4 or 5 years that I've been here, that's usually what helicopters correspond to. Okay, so we know that we want to set prices equal to marginal costs in order to generate the correct allocation of goods the correct production level of goods, and then also to achieve an efficient allocation. So if we think about what's going to happen then if we set price below marginal cost, you can imagine that it'll generate an inefficient outcome. So let's suppose that we have a scarce good. So again, a scarce good is one that has for which there is excess demand if you set a price of 0. So let's suppose we have a scarce good for which we charge some amount, which we'll call P prime, which is less than marginal cost. So for some reason, we're going to sell this thing to you at below cost. And so there's P prime. And so some buyers are now going to value the good at less than the cost of producing it. So in particular, all of these people that are between n star, so to the right of n star, and to the left of the point at which P prime and the marginal benefits curve cross, they're going to buy it, but they actually value the good at less than the amount that it's costing us to produce it. So what that's going to do is it's going to generate what we refer to as like a welfare loss or deadweight loss. So this is given by the red triangle here, and that's just the area between the marginal cost curve and the marginal benefit curve. So when marginal benefits are above marginal cost, then you're sort of generating this consumer surplus or this producer profit. But now that the marginal cost is greater than the marginal benefit, either the producer is losing money on each of these goods that it's selling, which is the case here because we set the price low, or for some reason the consumer is basically paying a price that's above what they're willing to pay. I mean, so usually that would be a little bit odd, because why would you by paying it, sort of in an economist world, that means you are willing to pay it. But I guess you could think about a case where maybe you were coerced into paying it. Okay, so at this point now, some buyers value the good less than the cost of producing it. And it's pretty easy to achieve a Pareto improvement. So what you could do is, instead of giving consumers to the right of n star the good, you could instead give them P star dollars. So why does this achieve a Pareto improvement? Well, so if we remember what the definition of Pareto improvement, it means that it says that at least one person is better off without anybody else being worse off. And so in this case, basically both people are better off. So let's say that the producer is going to give them P star dollars. The producer is actually happier giving them P star dollars than giving them the good, because the marginal cost curve is above P star there, right? So it actually costs the producer less to just give them the P star dollars than it does to produce the good, or at least it costs them less to give them P star dollars for P prime dollars versus giving them the good for P prime dollars. Okay, so the producer is going to be happier if you essentially cut back on production there, and the consumer is actually also going to be happier, because the consumer right now, they're getting the good, but they value it at some amount that's less than P star, because the marginal benefits curve is below P star, below P star in that region where the red triangle is. And so the consumer is actually going to view that as being a beneficial trade as well. So in this case, both parties are better off, and nobody else is worse off, so you're achieving a Pareto improvement. And you would end up, you would keep on doing that until you got back to what the Pareto efficient allocation was. Okay, so setting a price that's below the actual marginal cost of producing a good is not good for efficiency, and that's going to be kind of like the theme about, so that's kind of the core theme of environmental economics, is that in some cases there are costs that are real costs but aren't reflected in the price that a producer charges, and so in that case you have overconsumption of the good. You'd be better off actually producing less of it, because there's some people who are essentially paying below cost and they don't value it at the true cost of producing. So that's kind of the basic story. And then there's one other thing that I want to emphasize here that I think maybe doesn't come up so often in environmental classes, but it's kind of, well, I think it's important. So it turns out that the inefficiency here can actually be even worse if the situation resolves itself by having some other sort of cost substitute for the pricing mechanism. So I guess to a first approximation, the scenario that we're discussing here is one usually that involves congestion costs. So I think the special case of that people are most familiar with is traffic. So when you drive on the roads, they can get congested, and then it's sort of much more expensive to drive, not in terms of dollar terms, but in terms of the amount of time that it takes you. It becomes much more expensive to drive as it gets congested. And then parking is probably also something that you're familiar with, especially if you ever drive in Berkeley or certainly in San Francisco. It can be difficult to find parking depending on when you're driving. So let's consider a case here in which the price of the good in dollar terms is set at or close to zero. So we can think about a case with free parking. And ideally, what you would do is charge P star. So let's again assume that we have this vertical supply curve here that's like the total number of parking spaces in San Francisco. We have a demand curve given by the marginal benefit curve. And ideally, what we'd like to do is charge P star dollars to everybody who parks. That would get us to the efficient allocation. But instead, we say, it's a public good. The costs are paid off or whatever. It's all sunk cost now. So let's just give it out for free, which is the first approximation what we do right now. Okay, so in that case, so when you're charging P star, only people who value it at P star or more are going to park. And it's going to be easy to find parking because like the number of spaces will be just about equal to the amount of demand. And so there won't be like a shortage. And there'll be large net benefits. So we can see that right here. So remember, we originally said, look, in the short run at least, thinking about allocating all these spaces versus not allocating them at all and just having them sit empty, the benefits are equal to the area under the demand curve. And in this case, consumers are getting consumer surplus that's equal to that triangle. And then the quote-unquote producers, which in this case would probably be the government, is going to get, well, I guess it could be like a private supplier too or something like that. But whoever it is going to get revenue that's equal to P star times N star. So they're going to get all that benefit. So everybody's kind of happy. And now let's think about a case where we're going to provide parking at below market rates or often free. So what's going to happen there is that there's going to be excess demand, right? Because if we set the price at zero, which is right down here, then the demand is all the way out at the point at which the marginal benefit curve crosses the x-axis, right? So there's way more demand than there is supply. So something has to give. And what's going to give is that Q costs, so these waiting costs are going to rise until the point, so they're going to rise as demand exceeds supply. And you'll get to sort of a new equilibrium where what's restricting demand is basically these queuing costs. So the Q costs, let me just go back one. Oops. So the Q costs here, I put on the graph. And so you can think of basically there being no queuing cost until you hit N star, until you hit demand of N star, right? Because at that point, there's still an excess supply of parking, so you can always find a space. So there's nobody like waiting and circling the block, circling many blocks trying to find spaces. But then once you move into a case where there's more demand than supply, then all the spaces are taken. You arrive, you can't find space. You drive to the next block, you can't find space. You double back, you can't find space. You make a U-turn, you still can't find space, and so forth. And so these queuing costs are going to increase. And they're going to get worse and worse as more and more people are out there trying to find the spaces. So I don't know about you, but like, I've had it be the case certainly in San Francisco where it's like a space opens up right across the street or like halfway down the block, and before you can even get there, somebody else who's also looking for a space has already like swooped in and taken it. The other day, we were also like, I think we were going to a farmer's market on Saturday, and there was like literally a queue there, several cars waiting, and then the space opened up, and some guy came in from outside the parking lot and like drove in front of all of us and took the space. So maybe there's also like some sort of restriction on demand because people start like denting each other's cars when they get angry and stuff. But at any rate, so the queuing costs get worse and worse as you have more and more excess demand, right? And so that's why that line there that I labeled QC for queuing costs is sloping upward and doing so quite steeply. So what's going to happen is you're going to have a new equilibrium, which occurs when Q costs are high enough to deter any additional drivers. And so this is going to be this point Q star star that I put on there. So when the queuing cost curve crosses the marginal benefits curve, that's when you're again at equilibrium. So like what's happened here is you're not charging any dollar value, but there's this queuing cost that's increasing as there's more and more demand, and that's kind of substituting for the pricing mechanism, right? Eventually, it just becomes so much of a hassle to find a parking space that you decide to go somewhere else or to not go out that evening or whatever. And so that's the new equilibrium. And now it turns out that there's a huge welfare loss, and the welfare loss is given by basically this large rectangle that I just made go from like green to white. And so the reason why this represents a big welfare loss is that these queuing costs are real costs, right? So before, when we had a pricing mechanism where people were paying money for spaces, those were transfers. So from a consumer's viewpoint, like you don't like the fact that you have to pay for it, but at least it turns out that somebody else is getting that money. So the producer is getting that money, or the government is getting that money, and then it can use that to not have to pay, not have to charge as high a property tax or whatever, right? So that money is going somewhere. In the case of queuing costs, the money is really going nowhere, right? Like the fact that you have to circle the block 10 times to find a space doesn't actually make anybody better off, whereas the fact that you might pay $3 for the space or something would make somebody better off, be it the private parking producer or the government, which basically be the taxpayer, or maybe somebody else. So in the case of the pricing mechanism, you're basically talking about transfers, but in the case of having these queuing costs, you're really talking about literally just taking the money, the time here, and just burning it up and not doing anything with it. And so that's why all of this region that's this like white rectangle here is now completely unshaded because there is no benefit. Like nobody, either the producer or the consumer, is deriving any benefit from that part. And so you can see that basically half the net benefits of parking are destroyed. So before we had the square and the triangle, and now we just have the square, the triangle and a smaller rectangle, and then also this like little other triangle, but that's not nearly enough to offset it. And so the net welfare loss here is much larger than in the first example. So in the first example, we were just talking about undercharging people, but where there wasn't any sort of queuing cost or congestion thing going on. We had that red triangle of welfare loss. And then now we're talking about this huge red rectangle. So you can see that once you have other things, other costs that are real economic costs substituting for the pricing mechanism, that can generate very large losses. And actually, it's even a little bit worse than that, because if you think about it, it's not the case that everybody who ends up with spaces will be the ones who value them most. It just sort of maybe the ones who got lucky and happen to find the space. Whereas with the pricing mechanism, you know that everybody who ends up with space at least values it at more than P star dollars. Okay, so I'm going to leave off from there. I'll leave off there, and then we'll continue on Friday.